What's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel, the My Eye Campaign channel. Just wanted to get a little chat going, start talking with my people, seeing what's on everybody's brain, see what's on everybody's mind. If you got something you have on your mind, go ahead and drop it in the comments. I'm not going to censor you. I respect your 1A, your First Amendment. So go ahead and chat away. In the meantime, I'm going to be doing some work. So, if there's something I could do for you, let me know. Something on your brain, give it to me and I'll go to them to explain. Sometimes I could get in places that you can't, you know what I mean, and talk to people that you could never talk to. So, go ahead and keep it popping. I'm gonna play some music. Let me know if it's too loud. So I'll be doing a lot of research in the meantime. If you guys see me flipping through screens, because I'm working with different monitors. I got one here, one here, one here, and one here. So if you see me looking around, that's why. Don't you hate when you're trying to read some news and somebody throws a pop-up, wants you to sign up, and doesn't let you move forward? Block. You guys remember when the California passed that law, and people were assuming that it was pedophile law? But let me read to you what it says. According to the bill, it only applies to consensual sex. This is a law they passed in September 2020 in California. Okay, so let me start over. So according to the bill, it only applies to consensual sex, whether it be vaginal, oral, or anal, between a minor of 14 years or older. But at 14 years of age, a minor is still just a minor. Most laws recognize individuals younger than 18 as minors, which in the case of the U.S. law, and yet most scientists are agreeing that individual laws don't really reach full maturity until the age of 25. So this is what California is trying to say. But the law is this: as long as there's a 10-year difference, it's okay. So like your 14-year-old could be dating a 24-year-old and it's cool. There's no statutory laws, there's no rape involved, nothing. So do you think that your 14, 15, or 16, or even your 17-year-old daughter or son is capable of making mental, mature adult decisions when it comes to sex and pedophilia. So I don't agree with California on that law. The governor of California is a Gavin Newsom. If you guys ever heard of Gavin Newsom, he's a Democrat. He signed into the law that would allow judges to decide whether or not to list someone as a sex offender for having oral anal sex with a minor. So whenever you're engaging in any of those, I guess it's up to the judge to whether or not if he wants to put you on the sex offender list, or how much you're giving them on the take or whatever. But the bill has appalled many, as it should, and some have failed to realize that it was simply meant to expand the discretion that was already granted to judges in the past. So I guess they've already, in California in the past, they've already left it up to the judges whether or not people will get put on a sex offender list. But, if you're involved with anything with a child that has to do with abuse, you need to be put on a watch list immediately and no questions asked. They said that the bill was passed in the name of equality, claiming that the LGBTQ plus minors deserve the right to consensual sex too. Yet, but truly the only benefiting from the bill are those that should be charged as offenders, but are instead being defended by the state. So I don't know, you know how they have the letters, they got the LGBTQ. Well, they're trying to add P on the end of that one. And if I'm not mistaken, the M for the minors and the pedophilia. So it's going to make it all equal quality for the pedophile. Which, that's why I'm out here in DC, because I'm ready to do something about this once and for all. If you put me into office, I'll make sure that I'll stop child trafficking once and for all. I've been on the streets for a while, and I got my ear to the ground. I know I know a few different ways that I can help, but I just need your help. Can't do it without you. Okay, so at the age of 18, I got this information from the Liberty Champion website. If you want to check it out, my source, it's liberty.edu/champion 2020. And from being in school, I've learned to learn how to track down reliable sources for the most part. So anything that usually ends with the edu is pretty trustworthy website, trustworthy source. Doesn't mean that they're not going to make up stuff, but if you're going to read news, at least read it from like edu.gov, the trusted source that you know is trusted. Okay. So it says that clearly the law understates that there are certain things in life that require a citizen to be older and more mature, given that they entail actions that could potentially harm the individual or other individuals. So if they're over here, you could drink at 18, or they changed it now. So you could drink at 21, and you used to be able to smoke at 18. I think it's 21 now to buy tobacco. But you could still go to war at 18, Isn't it a trip that you're old enough to go to war, but you ain't old enough to drink? What kind of control is that, right? But so the government believes that a 14-year-old girl or boy is mature enough to consent to sex with someone who is up to 10 years older than they are. The truth is they are not. I don't know. I think that they're not mature enough. What about you? What do you think? In passing the bill, not only is the government once more stripping children and protection that they need to have, but they're also opening up doors for sex offenders to continue to go unprosecuted and uncharged. So this is no longer a world where children are safe to grow up in. I don't believe that children are safe to grow up in this world. And if you start understanding child trafficking and where it's coming from and the root of it, your brain will explode. Whenever I first started realizing how bad the pandemic was for child trafficking, I couldn't sleep for like the first 2 weeks. And after that, after the 2 weeks, I started coming around, and then I started feeling. I went from not being able to sleep in shock to finally getting a couple of days of sleep, and then being angry for a while, for a long time. And I still tend to get angry every time the subject comes up. But I've learned how to control my emotions because I'm going to have to in order to take our bills and our laws so that we can get them legislated at the Capitol. And if you want to know where the Capitol is at, go ahead and subscribe, like, dong, the bong. Just kidding. But show you where the Capitol is. It's in the background of one of my videos. If you just want to check out another one of my videos here on YouTube. So, what do you think? Leave a reply to what we were just talking about. Excuse me for one moment. I was gone for a minute. Did you miss me? Okay, so we're going to look up some other laws so we can talk about it. Let's see right here. Watch. Let's hold on real quick. So according to Wikipedia, we have a age of consent reform. Okay. Just the name of that doesn't sound right. Does it to you? Age of consent reform? Like, if you're an adult, you should know what a child is. You shouldn't have to be like, let me try to figure it out, man. Your instincts should kick in immediately and tell you if the person you're dealing with is a child or an adult. And just because a child acts like an adult doesn't mean they are an adult. Okay. So according to what I remember before I get into the age of consent form, um, I'm not going to misquote my information. I'm going to get back to that one, and I'm not going to forget it because it's what got me motivated to be out here. But I want to be able to cite the source. So I do know that I've heard that some people go to other countries to have sex with children because it's legal over there and it's not frowned upon. Such, I heard that Greece is one of the places where they accept pedophilia as a condition. If you just came to the channel, welcome. How you doing? Don't forget to subscribe and like. And I got you. I run a campaign called My Our Campaign. Moved out here to DC to get my politicking on. Don't really know what I'm doing out here, but I know I'm led by the Lord to be out here, so that's what I'm doing. But right now we're talking about child sex laws and age of consent reform. And if you got something you want on your mind, go ahead and drop it in the chat there, and I'll do my best to answer for you. Okay, so what I was saying earlier is that some people go to other countries in order to have sex with children that are underage. And when not starts, but it's been happening, and that's considered an entity. It then turns into a business, and then when it turns into a business, you kind of, if you're in that circle, you kind of don't see you don't see how it's hurting the children because you're just trying to make a buck. And in some countries they'll sell their children for $10. Seriously, that's sad, right? All right, so let's see. In 1275, the English government set an age of consent at 12 years old for females as a part of the rape law. And in 1576, law was created with more severe punishments for which the age of consent was set to 10 years old for females. Okay, so that makes you think like 10 years old, right? The age of consent. Okay, and this is in the UK, but this was back in 1576. Okay. Okay, so I guess back at the time there was a guy named Juris, and his name was Sir Matthew, and stated that both rape laws were valid at the same time. It's just crazy. So the age of consent for marriage, sexual intercourse, was set at 12 years old for maidens and 14 years old for youths under the English common law. And I could get to the English common law here in a moment. So let's go ahead and check that out right now, I guess, before we get into the next sentence. Okay. So the English law is the common legal system of England and Wales, comprising mainly criminal law and civil law, but each branch has its own courts and procedures. All right, just to let you know, give you a little synopsis of the English law. Okay. So I was trying to find the law for that, but I can keep moving forward. Okay, so moving on. So I guess the age of majority was set at 21 years old, and adolescent males and adolescent females needed parental consent to marry under the English common law. But the consent marriage for sex intercourse was set at 12 years old for maidens and 14-year-old youths. So it doesn't make sense. That sounds kind of backwards right there, don't it? Okay. So in 1875, the Offense Against the Persons Act raised it to 13. Ooh, a whole freaking year, right? Raised it to 13 in Great Britain and Ireland. So I guess the age of consent, was all over at around 12. So they raised it to 13 in Britain and Ireland in 1875. And so it took the 15, 16, 17, 18. It took 300 years to raise the age of consent 1 year for a child from 12 to 13 for the age of sexual intercourse consent. All right. So that's pretty pathetic. So the Criminal Law Act of 1885 raised it to 16. So just within that amount of time, so from 75 to 85, so 10 years later, they went ahead and raised it up to 3 more years, which is now 16. And 16 seems to be about the average age consent all across the United States. But in 1917, less than 30 years later, I think it says, a little over, let's see, 85, 95, 105, 215. So a little over 30 years later, in 1917, a bill raising the age of consent in Great Britain and Ireland from 16 to 17 was defeated only by one vote. So that kind of makes you think of it's been going on for so long that it's rooted into our society at this point, so it's going to take a lot to strip all this out of there. One vote. So in Northern Ireland in 1950, the legislature of Northern Ireland passed a law called Children and Young Persons Act of 1950 that raised the age of consent from 16 to 17. So they just keep going up little by little. So, it's probably generations of people. Excuse me. All right. Sorry, I had to cough. Didn't want to cough on you. Okay, so where were we? So it took 300, almost 350 years just to raise the age of consent from 12 to 17. So what do you think? What do you think is the age of maturity for a young woman or a young man in order to engage in sexual intercourse with people on their own recognizance? Go ahead and drop that in the comments if you feel like talking. Okay, so after that, so in 1929, the age of consent for marriage, sexual intercourse, was raised to 16-year-olds for both females and males. And I'll get back to the males part in a while about how they started adding little boys into the mix. So in 1970, the age majority was lowered from 21 to 18. So it looks like someone got into the office, like I was telling you earlier, got into office, whatever, and said, we're going to go gun ho, right? And they end up raising the age of consent back in the 1500s. Okay. The age majority was set to 20 years old for adolescent males. You needed parental consent to marry. It's so twisted up. They got it so twisted up so that it's confusing. Okay. So, anyways, what I was trying to say is they jacked it up, and now they're bringing it back down. So you got a guy that was gun ho, a person that was gun ho, and now they're like, oh, well, we'll just bring it back down a little bit because I still want to do whatever they can, I guess, to youngsters. So according to research conducted by the Center for Family and Household Research at Oxford Brookes University in 1999, an increasing proportion of young people are sexually active below the age of consent. Well, we all know that we were all youngsters once, and we all know what was going on, what happened in our lives. But say you weren't exposed to uh, sexual endeavors, or you were taught about it when you were young. As soon as you could learn how to think and talk and walk, you should get taught about sex. So pushing forward. So we would have talked about the Oxford Brookes University in 1999. An increasing proportion of young people are sexually active below the age of consent, which means you probably see sexual exploitation on TV or the radio or whatever, hear about it or talk about it or social media about it, and start practicing with each other. And this could even be people within your home. Okay. So as of 1990, the National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles, short for NATSAL, NATSAL, reported that a high proportion of people who engage in other forms of sexual activity prohibited by law, including mutual masturbation and oral sex, beginning on the average age of 14. So moving on, let's talk about France now. In 1977, while a reform in the French Penal Code was under discussion in the Parliament, a petition to decriminalize all consented relationships between adults and minors below the age of 15 was sent to Parliament but did not succeed in changing the law. In 1978, the petition was discussed in a broadcast by Radio France Culture in the program Dialogues, with the transcript later published as a Sexual Morality and Law in the book by Michael Foscott. The participants, including Foscott, playwright, actor Jean Danet, and novelist Guess said he was a gay activist, had all signed the petition to get it going. So it might take me about 4 or 5 days just to get to the point that I'm trying to get at. So I'm just reading you history, okay, some history of what's going down. All right, so that was a little paragraph from France, but the Netherlands, we're going to go ahead and speak about the Netherlands next. Between 1990 and 2002, the Netherlands operated what was in effect to the age of consent of 12, subject to qualifications, okay? So like, I guess they're saying between 1990 and 2002, the Netherlands operated what was in effect of the age of consent of 12 and was subject to qualifications. So what does that mean, subject to qualifications? So it means like, hey, they have a checklist to see if the 12-year-old is okay to engage in permitted sexual intercourse. The relevant law passed in November of 1990 that permitted sexual intercourse for young people between 12 and 16, but it allowed a challenge by parents based on erosion of parental authority and child exploitation, which could be heard by counsel for protection of children. In 1979, a Dutch-specific socialist party supported an unsuccessful petition to lower the age of consent to 12. So they keep going back up and back down. And so you can see why these people go to different countries to get their pedo on. Just let that sink in for a minute. It's a damn shame, ain't it? So wait till I get to the United States. You're gonna be even more disgusted. All right, let's move on. Okay, so moving on to Russia. This is before 1922. Before 1830, the age of consent for marriage, sexual intercourse was 15 years old for males and 13 years old for females. So I wonder why they say that women mature faster than men, or I should say girls mature faster than boys. But I think that little boys and little girls should be treated like children and not like an entity. Both the female and the male teenager needed to consent from their parents to marry because they were under 20 years old. And that was the age majority. But in 1830, the age of consent for marriage, sexual intercourse was raised to 18 for males and 16 for females. Though 18-year-old preferred for females. So 16, but they prefer. So they don't ever make the laws very clear. They always make them real fuzzy. So you could get some slick lawyer in there that'll bend the system and then manipulate it to go however you want. We've all witnessed some slick lawyers, haven't we? But in Russia after 1991, this is after 1991. So it took from 1922 to 1991 to change some laws in Russia also. I don't have anything pre 1922 because I don't know if that's when the Soviet started or whatever. I don't know. I gotta get that's another channel. But in 1998, the age of consent from 16 to 14. So it lowered from the age of consent from 16 to 14. But in 2002, the age of consent from 14 back to 16. So if you do the math, that's 98, 99, 2001, 2, that's 4 years. So you got to see who was president in those ages all around the country. So you can start tying people in. You know what I mean? And you can start drawing a map after a while. So how trafficking rings, just like that. So that's how you need to go down. But Vladimir Putin said that a party advocating the lowering age of consent cannot be legally registered, hence to be a legal party in Russia. And there's no site for that, so that's not 100% on that last sentence. So North America, where we're at, that's what I'm getting to now. So we'll get into North America. In June 2006, the Canadian government proposed a bill to raise the age of consent from 14 to 16. And this is in Canada. 14 to 16 for the age of consent. But in 1890, it was raised from 12 to 14. So again, we could do some more math. You have 1890, 1990, that's 100 years. So I'm not sure, but I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a whole other channel too. I'm still learning about that, but that could mean that there's certain families that have been in to play for a long time. And that's why they only go up by 2 years at a time, because they give the people a little bit just to shut them up. So it was raised from 12 to 14 while creating a near age exemption for sex between 14 and 15-year-old partners that are less than 5 years older. All right, so let me just read that over again because I didn't understand what the fuck that just said. Excuse my language. Okay, it says, the age of consent was raised from 12 to 14 while creating a near age exemption for sex between 14 and 15-year-olds and partners less than 5 years older. In keeping an existing near age clause to sex between 12 and 13-year-olds and partners less than 2 years older. So they're saying that there could be a 5 year gap difference, but the law would start it would be an existing near age clause. We got to find out what that means. Existing near age clause for sex between 12 and 13, but not to exceed with partners less than 2 years older. So 12 is okay to have 14, and then earlier, how I took it is 14 can now, a 14-year-old and 11-year-olds can start doing stuff. And that's just, we'll get back to that in a minute. But the initiative also maintains that a temporary exception for already existing marriages of minors from 14 to 15 to adults, but forbids new marriages like these in the future. So if you're already married pre, I guess that's in parentheses, it doesn't end. So in 1890, you could be grandfathered in if you're a young married couple. If you got married while you're young, a couple of 13 or 14 years getting married. They've done that. They used to do that back in those days. So, but after that, you couldn't get married as a youngster. All right, so we get into the United States. So what do you know when I get here to the United States and start trying to see? Oh yeah, never mind. I just have to open up the tab. All right. So the first thing that I noticed that pops up when we start talking about child trafficking, and I'm going down from the different provinces and states, but within the first sentence, I see the word rape. Started in the 18th century. The age of consent in question has to do with the law and rape of the law, not the law of marriage, sexual intercourse, as sometimes understood under English common law. The age of consent, a part of the law of rape was 10 or 12 years old, and then rape was defined by forceful intercourse with a woman against her own will. To convict a man of rape, both force and lack of consent had to be proved, except in the case of a girl who was under the age of consent. So, according to the English common law, existed in British colonies of America, was adopted by Delaware and other states in 1776. But so even within those days, if you read the law, actually read it, and I've read the law, it says that back in those days, um, here in the states, you could legally have sex with any age person, and as long as it wasn't against their will, it was legal. So this is where it starts getting hairy. So as you notice, the key word that I said earlier was girl. I didn't say boy. I said girl. Okay. So I'll go ahead and recap. So in the 18th century, the rape and law of marriage, sexual intercourse was misunderstood. So it was always wishy-washy in every district. But anyways, the part of the rape of the law was 10 or 12 years old, and it was defined as forceful intercourse with a woman against her will. To convict a man of rape, both force and lack of consent had to be proved. Okay, so what my point is that there was no laws that had to do with little boys getting raped. It only had to do with women vaginal sex, right? And so what they do is they just keep breaking down sex. So if you got your vaginal, your anal, um, your missionary or the vaginal, and then what are they called? Oral. You got the oral, so you got the. So what they did is they're saving each of those and they break them down. So in the 18th century, there was a lot of little boys getting raped because you can according to the law you could get in trouble for raping a girl. So, but according to the law, you don't get in trouble for raping a boy. So think about that. So the law only stated you would get in trouble for raping a girl, but not raping a boy. So a lot of these pedophiles or whatever, they switched over from raping girls to raping boys, little boys now. And that's called anal sex because little boys don't have vaginas, right? So just think about that for a second. So anyways, here comes the 19th and 20th centuries rolling around. In Delaware, let Delaware sink in. In Delaware, the age of consent was 10 years old up until 1871 when it was lowered to 7 years old. What the frick? So the age of consent in Delaware in the 19th and 20th centuries, in 1871, was lowered from 10 to 7. No, fucking freak you out. Okay. Under the 1871 law, a man was given the death penalty for sex with a girl below the age of consent. So back in the day, they were like, the death penalty was around, which is I want to impose and make mandatory. Live. Okay. So back to what I was saying is that under the 1871 law, a man was given the death penalty for sex with a girl below the age of consent. And remember, the age of consent was still 10 to 12 around those times for a girl, which is still nothing about a boy. So here you go from the 18th to the 19th, 20th century, and you got little boys just getting raped. Okay, think about that. So in 1880, 37 states had the age of consent for 10 years. So they had an age of consent for 10 years, right? And then 10 states had an age of consent for, they lowered it to 12 years. And then Delaware by itself had an age of consent at just 7 years. So out of everybody in the states, Delaware had the lowest of age of consent to 7 years old. That's fucking pathetic. In the late 19th century, a social purity movement composed of Christian feminist reform groups began advocating to raise the age of consent to 16. So that's the late 19th century. You guys hear the sirens? See the light? Could be going down. You never know. We'll see what happens. Hopefully everybody is at peace. Okay. Okay, let's see. So by the 19th century, so it was called the social purity movement. I think some of you might have heard of the social purity movement. Again, it was composed of Christian feminist women to reform the age of consent from 10, 7, and 12 years old up to the age of 16. So that's a pretty big jump, pretty big gap right there, right? All right. So, and then in the end, ultimately raising it up to the age of 18. Okay. But by 1920, 26 different states had an age of consent at 16, but 21 states had an age of consent at 18. And one state, Georgia, had an age of consent at 14. So the only thing that Georgia did was just, Georgia doubled, but I wonder if Delaware was anywhere in those states that got bumped up to 18 for the age of consent. So Alaska was brought from the Russians and became the 49th. We bought Alaska from the Russians back in '59, and it became our 49th state for the United States. The age of consent was 16 years old in Alaska, but however, Hawaii became the 50th state in the United States in '59, and the age of consent over there was 14. So that's like that's the messed up thing about letting states run their own stuff. It should be like a law that's nationwide that's passed around. So if we make an age of consent law, it shouldn't have to go through the channels of each different state in order to be a law. If we make it a law in our nation's capital, it should be a law in all the other states. As far as when it comes to age of consent, I don't know what that borderlines. It borders like having everybody do the same thing as we make it a law, then everybody has to follow it. Because I know the states can impose their own legislations and jurisdictions on their kind of stuff, and add statutes and stuff to their laws for their penal codes and stuff. So, Okay, so Alaska was brought from. Okay, so we bought Alaska from the Russians in 1959. So two final states legislating the ages into 15 and 18 were Georgia and Hawaii from 14 to 16, raised in 1995, and in 2001, respectively. One state, Colorado, had the age of consent at 15, having been lowered from 18 because the age of maturity or the majority was lowered from 21 to 18 in 1970. So in the 70s is when stuff started getting really, people started changing. But that's when you started involving young boys into the mix, and I'm going to get to that. Okay, so it was lowered. We said it was having been lowered from 18 years old for the age of majority was lowered from 21 to 18 in 1970. So it kind of skips some history, but I'll go ahead and speak on it at a different time. But as of October 16th of 2020, the age of consent in each state in the United States was either 16 years of age, 17 years of age, or 18 years of age. So now any age of consent is 16, 17, 18 throughout the United States. But I think it should be very clear and just be one. So Alabama changed their laws in 2012. Hawaii in 2001 updated their laws from 14 to 16. So in Georgia in 2005, a bill was proposed before a General Assembly of Georgia to raise the age of consent from 16 to 18. However, the bill failed, and Georgia was the most resistant state to raise its age consent in the early 1900s. Georgia's age of consent was 10 years old up until the age of 1918. So Georgia and Delaware, man, they were about 7 and 10. So again, the Georgia's age of consent was 10 years old up until 1918, at which the time consent was raised to 14 years old. After raising the age of consent in 1918, Georgia was the only state in the United States to have an age of consent lower than 16. So I guess by the 1918, the majority of the United States had raised the age limit to 16 minimum. But Georgia was the only one that was still hanging out below that. Okay. Georgia's age consent remained at 14 until 1995, when a bill proposed by Senator Steve Langford to make the age of consent 16 passed. Excuse me. In 2006, following the case of General Wilson versus State, aggravated child molestation. Okay, so these are kind of fast forwarding of subject of what I want to talk to, because I need to break it down in detail in order for it to get my point across. So like I said, it's going to take me about maybe 5 or 6 sessions. Okay, so now we're getting to aggravated child molestation, which to me sounds like rape, right? Was reduced to a misdemeanor with a maximum of 1 year in prison if the offender was under 19. Excuse me. Aggravated child molestation was reduced to a misdemeanor with a maximum of 1 year in prison if the offender was under the age of 19. If the victim was either 14 or 15 years old and the offender is no more than 48 months older than the victim. So they're still trying to keep it adolescent rape. Previously, the aggravated child molestation at any age carried 15 to 20 years of prison, regardless of the age difference between the victim and offender. So I guess it's just still at discretion on what these judges want to do. The law is not clear, so that gives them too much power. In Kentucky, under the Kentucky law, a person who is 16 years of age or older may consent to a sexual act with a person not more than 10 years older than the minor, but otherwise below the age of consent, or below the age of 18 is presumed incapable of to consent a sensual act. However, where a person is in position of authority over a minor, such as a teacher, coach, or relative, whatever the age difference is, a minor below the age is deemed incapable of consent. And it says there's an exception, but I haven't clicked on it to check it out. In Missouri, in 2008, a bill was proposed in Missouri legislature to raise the age of consent from 17 to 18, and it was sponsored by a representative named Stanley Cox. South Carolina, in 2017, a bill was proposed for the legislature to raise the age of 16 to 18, but it did not succeed. So, age of consent 16, South Carolina. So I was saying at the beginning that the average is about 16. So Wisconsin, 81. 81 was their last time. And they got 83. Under the new sex law, carried was 16 exception. So these are all these sex crimes are still misdemeanors. You know, so that's why you see a lot of these people living next door. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a illness or a disease like they say it is? Put it in the comment box. Let me know what you think. Hit that subscribe, hit that like button, dong that bell. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna move it forward a little bit to South America in Peru, where the age of consent was increased from 14 to 18. But the Congress voted to return the age to 14 regardless of gender or sexual orientation. But with strong public opposition, the law was raised back to 18 on June 27, 2007, raised by a vote of 74-0. So that means that everybody was on board on that one. And then it was returned to 14 in January 2013. So it looks like, some people got out of power and then put it back in because you know how they do. So in Asia, in India, let's see. We'll get to India later. So I'm going to touch on the United States again. So Philip Jenkins said in the mid-1970s that there was a widespread sympathy among homosexual activist groups for lowering the age of consent for all sexual activities, with many gay publications discussing lowering it for boys. Okay, so now they're finally starting to talk about the boys. Remember I was telling you in the 70s that was getting pretty crazy? So in the mid-1970s is when they finally started discussing little boys. Okay. And then the tensions and antagonisms continued among activist circles until the 1980s. But however, since the 1970s, gay liberal tonist groups promoting frontline advocacy against the age of consent were falling into decline. But in 1971, the age of majority was lowered from 21 years old to 18, except in Mississippi, Alabama, and Nebraska. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to touch on some pedophile advocacy. It says some pedophiles have called to abolish the age of consent to lower or to allow adults to have sex freely with their prepubescent children, arguing that they could consent. Groups advocating child sexual abuse and abolishment age of consent laws include NAMBLA and Heart Progress in the United States and the Vergoyn Martin in the Netherlands. But several organizations in them have been involved with pro-pedophilia activism in the past, and only a few of these still exist today. In the 2000s, there were self-declared pedophiles on certain internet websites and chat rooms. So with that said, we'll go ahead and discuss, we'll get into more details later on, maybe tomorrow or the next day. But if you subscribe, like, and bang that dong, I'll go ahead and give you a notification of whenever a new video comes out. I don't know, I could go out all night talking about it, but I don't know. Just stay awake and stay with me whenever you can. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the link below in the description. And if you can, go ahead and support the My Hour campaign. If you go to the description from the link, you can see, go to the read more, and you can see a little bit of description of what the campaign is going to be geared towards, and what your funds will go towards. And if you do go ahead and donate to the My Art campaign, I will send you an itemized list of every penny that has been spent on the campaign, so you know I'm not using anything for personal gain, because I have to be put in by you, the people, in order to get stuff happening and going on. So, like I always say, if you're got something on your brain, give it to me. Let me explain. Because sometimes I can talk to people that you can't, and I might be able to get in doors that are closed for you, but that are open for me. And so together we'll make it, and we'll be okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off here, and then check it out, and then little by little I'll start updating the software and stuff so that everybody can start getting more informed, and I can be more professional and a little bit better. If you got any tips for me, let me know. But I just want you to know one thing: I work for you. So when you put me into office, I'm not gonna be telling you what to do. You're gonna be telling me what to do. So with that said, have a good night. I love you guys. Keep Jesus in your life. And don't forget to get on your knees when you pray. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.